Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's media availability with Premier Susan Holt. Bon après-midi tout le monde et bienvenue à cette conférence de presse avec la Première Ministre Susan Holt. I'd like to let everyone know that interpretation is available for service in the language of your choice. Je tiens à vous informer que des services d'interprétation sont disponibles. Vous pouvez y accéder en cliquant sur le bouton d'interprétation en bas de l'écran. Before I turn things over to the Premier, I'd just like to remind everyone to please place their mics on mute. Premier will start with some opening comments. Over to you, Premier.
Thank you. Merci, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm happy to share with you some information about the meeting that I had with Prime Minister Mark Carney earlier today here in Fredericton, ahead of the announcement that he made at one of our great New Brunswick companies this afternoon. So we packed a lot into the time together. It was a really focused meeting. We started off with a conversation about major projects and the projects that New Brunswick has been advocating for and what we anticipate to be the next steps for those projects and the evolution of both the Major Projects Office and the nature of the supports and the evaluations that are being done through that process. Alors, c'était une bonne conversation, puis on a aussi appris de la diversité d'opportunités et de fonds qui existent pour quelques de nos projets qui sont, je pense que sont proches d'être supportés par le gouvernement avec les fonds qui existent, qu'on se trouve dans le budget. Alors, c'était vraiment encourageant d'entendre que les projets qu'on a fait une grande promotion sont bien compris et qu'on a un bon support du gouvernement fédéral pour avancer ces projets-là. We talked quite a bit about energy and how important energy is to growing our economy here in New Brunswick and beyond, and the various opportunities that present themselves in the energy space, whether that be some of the exploring that we've been doing in the nuclear space in terms of that capacity. Obviously, the development of renewable energy that New Brunswick has been pursuing pretty aggressively with the large volume of wind projects that we've put forward. We talked about the need for the right kind of national energy infrastructure that connects multiple different provinces, interties and transmission connections to make sure that the national system is optimized and that we're all contributing to competitive and reliable energy here in Canada to support our economic needs. So that was part of the conversation. We absolutely talked about the U.S.-Canada negotiations and how those are proceeding, the separation of the IEEPA tariffs and the 232 tariffs, the work that the government has done on the softwood lumber conversation with their counterparts in the U.S. We talked about some of the specific next steps that need to happen on the softwood front to represent what Canadian industry is prepared to do in order to get the tariffs removed from what is a critical export and a critical industry here in New Brunswick. And so I found that the Prime Minister sort of demonstrated both a good handle on the file, the kind of seriousness that we are hoping for, as well as an urgency to continue and make sure that that conversation moves, even if it moves at a different pace, ideally a more accelerated pace than the CUSMA negotiations that seem to have slowed down. So that was critical that we get those next steps identified and both the federal and provincial governments moving on them. And we look forward to the work that the federal government is finalizing in terms of supports to the softwood industry. On attend dans quelques semaines à entendre des détails de supports qui vont venir du gouvernement fédéral pour notre industrie de bois d'œuvre parce qu'on a besoin de plus que juste des garanties de garantie de prêt. On a besoin de supports différents pour le moment qu'on se trouve dans l'industrie de bois d'œuvre au moment. Then we spent quite a bit of time talking about defense opportunities, and for me to be able to communicate to the Prime Minister the assets that New Brunswick has beyond what folks might know and see in terms of base Gagetown, as CFB Gagetown being the largest training base east of in Eastern Canada, training all of the ground-based military that we have, but also training folks in other capacities. It pairs really beautifully with New Brunswick's leadership in cybersecurity as home to the Canadian Institute for Cybersecurity and a lot of different cybersecurity experts who bring that to the defense space and training our future military on cybersecurity and cyber defense, and building on both of the strengths that New Brunswick has, as well as some of the new IP we've been developing in the AI space and AI for aerospace. We talked about the opportunities in the defense supply chain here in New Brunswick, as we have folks that support a variety of the different vehicles of different fleet that the defense sector needs, and that have components or portions that are developed here in New Brunswick, as well as the key role that our port infrastructure plays in those supply chains, both the opportunities at the Port of Belledune to support military movement, as well as opportunities at the Port of St. John, both to supply and move the goods that CFB Gagetown needs. And so painting that full picture, as well as the needs on base to modernize housing and infrastructure and to take advantage of New Brunswick's leadership in modular housing built with Canadian wood, and how that capacity could be used for what Gagetown needs to revitalize the housing that we provide there for the force. So lots of opportunities, and great to see that one of our leading housing producers was then put on the forefront with the Prime Minister's visit this afternoon. Then we talked a bit about the government's budget and its infrastructure funds, both community infrastructure funds as well as health infrastructure funds, looking to identify for New Brunswick what kind of flexibility exists in those funds to make sure that the Prime Minister and his team members understood the need for flexibility, that one size doesn't fit all in Canada when it comes to capacity for matching, size of project, that kind of thing. We emphasized that New Brunswick is undergoing quite a modernization of our digital health infrastructure with big projects up ahead, and wanting to understand whether the federal health infrastructure funds will accommodate digital investment, as well as a significant amount of assets that are already amortized and appreciated that need to be refreshed, as we announced even last week with a 52-year-old endoscopy suite at the Georges Dumont Hospital that needs new life and needs to be expanded with modernized equipment. Alors, de bonnes discussions de fonds d'infrastructure. Ça, c'est quelque chose que, durant notre réunion de la Conseil de la Fédération, les premiers ministres ont parlé de le budget et de l'investissement dans l'infrastructure qui se retrouve dans le budget. Et je pense qu'on va continuer cette conversation au sujet du budget pour l'infrastructure dans une réunion des premiers ministres la semaine prochaine, lundi prochain. Alors, de conversations qui étaient vraiment alignées entre le premier ministre et les premiers ministres de l'équipe du Canada. We also talked a little bit about pharmacare really briefly, to understand from the Prime Minister whether the flexibility exists for us to continue the negotiations that we had previously started with the Department of Health, and whether that flexibility to make sure that the program had the right coverage and didn't miss any of the elements that the New Brunswick coverage currently has. So we touched on that. Let me just check, je vais voir si j'ai couvert tous les sujets. Projet majeur, défense, poids d'œuvre, santé, infrastructure, care. Okay, I think that that's the summary of it as best that I can provide at this time, but very happy to dig into more details. It was certainly encouraging to hear about the work that's coming with the Defense Industrial Strategy, the signals that the Prime Minister was setting on funding for trade-related infrastructure and energy projects and more. The work that's being done to get a critical mineral strategy in place that will tie together a variety of different projects and interests on that front. And so I think it was a productive meeting. Avec ça, je vais prendre vos questions. Merci.
Thank you, Premier. We will now proceed to questions from members of the media. Each reporter will get one question and one follow-up, and you have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Chaque journaliste aura droit à une question puis une suivie. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. We'll go to Adam Hears, Telegraph Journal.
Thanks. Thanks, Premier, for taking our questions. The Prime Minister says New Brunswick is named on a list of new projects to be deemed in the national interest to be unveiled on Thursday. My question is whether that's simply the interties as part of Wind West between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and PEI, or do you expect other projects on the list like Sisson Mine or something else?
I expect it to be another project on the list.
Can you elaborate? And that's not my second question, but
well, I think we'll get the news on Thursday, so I don't want to scoop the announcement that's going to come. But we've been working hard on a number of projects, and the announcement won't be the interties. It will be one of the other projects that we've been pushing for.
Thanks. And just my follow. The Prime Minister confirmed new supports for the softwood lumber industry are in the works, likely by the end of the month. What specifically did you ask him today on that front? And then you made a comment about negotiating this faster than CUSMA. Is that possible?
Well, I hope it's possible because there's a lot of back and forth that's going to happen on the softwood lumber file, and there's a number of moving pieces that are up for negotiation in that at that focus table, different from the broad renegotiation of CUSMA, which we see as the work is going to have to be done on autos and steel and aluminum, and all of those pieces are going to have to get worked out as the new CUSMA framework comes into place. But clearly, we've been negotiating softwood lumber with the U.S. government for years, and we've seen some consolidating of position amongst Canadian industry in terms of what we're prepared to do and to offer to the coalition in the United States. And so I think that there's movement that can be made on getting an offer in front of them and then starting to work back and forth on that piece. I think the 232 tariffs separately, what piece might be left there versus tackling the big chunk of the 35% softwood lumber tariffs, that remains to be seen. But we want to get those down. And then as we lead into the CUSMA renegotiation, then the other piece will come. Does that make sense?
Yep, yeah, I understand that. And then maybe just in this, I know it was a two-part question, but the supports, anything specifically?
Yeah, there's a number of supports that we've been discussing, and it's interesting in New Brunswick because our industry is varied between our primary producers that are pulling logs and converting them into product, and then we have our value-added manufacturers like our cabinet makers and others, and there's slightly different competitive landscapes for each of those and different U.S. demand and even different customer cycles and different middlemen. And so the supports need to have the flexibility that they can help a customer who's just lost maybe 30% of their business because the Americans are now being flooded with Vietnamese or other products at much lower rates. I mean, we're seeing even Russian wood now on par with Canadian wood for the Americans. And so it's really shifted the dynamic. So we need the kind of tangible funds that can support the acquisition of new customers, the productivity investments that decrease the operating costs of our mills and of our businesses here in New Brunswick in order to get to a place where we can continue to be competitive and sustain this really rocky period for our producers.
Thanks, Adam. Frederick Camarano, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Madame la Première ministre. Je voulais savoir, je veux continuer de parler du bois d'œuvre. Est-ce que la réponse que le Premier ministre vous a donnée aujourd'hui, ses intentions, est-ce qu'elles vous satisfont jusqu'à maintenant?
Ben oui, clairement, on a hâte de voir le support qui s'en vient, puis il nous dit que ça va être dans 2 semaines et le plus vite que possible, clairement, parce qu'on a une industrie les impacts sont là aujourd'hui. On a besoin que le support s'en vienne aussi vite que possible. Et avec les négociations, je pense que avec la communication durant les derniers jours et semaines avec l'industrie d'une façon nationale. Je pense que tout le monde est sur une page où c'est clair comment avancer. Et on a besoin d'un gouvernement fédéral qui est prêt à avancer cette discussion avec le gouvernement de l'États-Unis. Puis j'ai eu le sens que le gouvernement est prêt pour apporter la position aux États-Unis et voir si on peut débrancher les conversations puis avancer à une place où peut-être on peut réaliser un parti de l'accord pour enlever les tarifs sur le bois d'œuvre.
Je tente ma chance comme ça. Le grand projet d'infrastructure néo-brunswickois, il va impliquer que le Nouveau-Brunswick, celui qui va être annoncé jeudi, ou ça va impliquer plusieurs provinces?
Ah, projet va avoir des bénéfices pour le pays et pour notre sécurité et certainement les retombées économiques ne va pas être seulement pour le Nouveau-Brunswick. Ils vont certainement impliquer des compagnies qui vont nous aider avec le travail, qui ne sont pas toutes à Nouveau-Brunswick, mais les retombées primaires vont être pour notre province, mais les bénéfices vont se trouver pour le pays.
Merci. Jacques Poitras, CBC.
Hi, I asked the Prime Minister about the HST compensation for the tax holiday, and he didn't seem to have any idea what I was talking about. Can you comment?
Well, I think we're getting near the end of the negotiations on the HST holiday, but they haven't needed to involve the Prime Minister. The team here at Finance and Treasury Board has been working that out with their fellow civil servants in Ottawa, and I think we're getting close to the I's dotted and the T's crossed as needed to get that resolved.
Okay. And my follow-up is because he said that you hadn't raised it with him this morning. So is that accurate?
Yes, that's for the time that we had. It's well in hand by my colleagues at Finance and Treasury Board, and not something that I think needed the Prime Minister's attention because yeah, it's moved along as we may have hoped.
What's the timeline that you're talking about?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think we're now into the days to weeks. I'd like to see it done before the end of this calendar year. Some of that will be dependent on the federal government and their side of it. But as far as we're concerned, the work is done. It's just the finer points that are getting nailed down.
Thank you.
Anna Mandan, Global News.
Hi, Premier. I know that before this meeting on X, you talked about wanting to prioritize the system. This is mine. Can you talk a little bit about how that went?
Yeah, I think it's really important that Canada develop a national perspective on critical minerals because there's lots of different projects that we hear about in different parts of the country. And certainly here in New Brunswick, we have a lot of critical minerals that are sort of ripe and ready for development, many of which contribute to our interests, either our defense interests, our green economy interests, because they are critical for the development of solar panels and other things. We have some existing mines in the Brunswick mine, zinc and copper property, the potash mine in Sussex to bring back online. And those obviously have implications with other parts of the country, either where the ownership sits or where there are similar minerals being extracted. And the world is looking for these minerals right now. The competitive landscape is shifting. And so Canada identifying who we want to partner with from a consortium perspective, where we want to purchase and stockpile for our own interests or for our allies' interests. It's really important that that national perspective exists so that we can get the maximum benefit for the development of something like a Sisson mine, and the tungsten and molybdenum products that we're putting out there should contribute to the national interest as well as New Brunswick's interest, and we want to maximize that potential. So I think the federal government has now started to move on the development of a national critical minerals strategy and further develop how they support critical mineral projects in provinces like ours. It looks a little different sometimes when you're looking at offtake agreements and floor prices and the things that you might do to support a mineral project, different from straight financing and things like that.
And this is a bit of a repeat of a question you got in French, but when it comes to softwood lumber, do you feel like the federal supports are coming fast enough, will come fast enough?
Oh, I mean, I wish they were here yesterday, because we have industry that are feeling the squeeze, feeling the decrease of customer activity, or the squeeze on price competitiveness, and so they certainly can't come soon enough. But when the Prime Minister says in the next 2 weeks they'll confirm more supports, I can live with that.
Thanks, Anna. Lindsay Armstrong, Canadian Press.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my questions, Premier. I'm wondering if you can name the specific major projects that you advocated for in your meeting today.
Well, in the meeting today, we talked about the projects that we have always had on the list. So we've been advocating for the Eastern Energy Partnership, which has transmission components, new nuclear components, and pipeline components. We've been advocating for our ports at the Port of St. John and the Port of Belledune. There's 2 different versions of projects and investment that will unlock both capacity to move goods across Canada as well as capacity to reach new markets and support the economy here in New Brunswick and beyond. We've been advocating for the Sisson Mine project that we've talked about on this call, and we've also been advocating for an investment in modular housing and a center for modular housing expertise that pairs with our post-secondary institutions here and the well-developed industry that we have in New Brunswick. And so I think those were the 5. Did I just cover 5? That we had put on the list originally, and have been working to advance each of those projects with different channels and pathways opening up to those projects through the work that the federal government has done to get this budget in place. So now we have, I think, more opportunities to get multiple projects supported through different ways, some of which through a major project designation and some of which through other funding and support mechanisms that they've now created.
Thank you. The Prime Minister assured us today that this budget is it's good for all Canadians, but it is definitely good for New Brunswickers and will make the lives of New Brunswickers better. How confident are you in that?
Well, look, I appreciate those statements from the Prime Minister, because at the end of the day, that's what, the New Brunswickers that I talk to are looking for: access to healthcare. They're looking for relief with a cost of living squeeze that is driving up almost all of their major bills, but not seeing a corresponding increase to their wages or to their income. And so looking for those kinds of measures, like this government put in place a tax cut sort of immediately when they came into power. Some of that support for affordability is what New Brunswickers want. So being able to build more homes and more affordable homes as quickly as possible should contribute to being able for people here to get access to affordable apartments to rent and a market that can provide them with the kind of housing that they or their family might need in a way that they can afford. So it's important that the federal government, even though they are maybe further removed than we are at the provincial level or municipal governments are, that they constantly keep in mind the quality of life and the cost of living for New Brunswickers. So there's still some things that we'd like to see translate from words on a budget page to actual investments in community to make a difference for New Brunswickers here. But I think there's lots that we can build on and pull from in this budget.
Thank you. Natalie Sturgeon, CHCO TV.
Thanks, Premier. Obviously, I think you're aware of the infrastructure deficit for municipalities at about 2.5 billion. At least that's what it's estimated to be. And I wondered, have you identified any specific sets of infrastructure on the municipal level that you would like to come out of the Build Community Strong Fund? I know that they've identified bridges, roads, and water systems, which are something that I hear about regularly around the council chamber.
Well, you've certainly named some of the big ones, Natalie, and this is something that's been on the provincial radar, because you would know that we just put a capital infrastructure funding program in place for municipalities to the tune of $63 million to support what we've been hearing from municipalities about the challenges and the strains that they've been experiencing. We see in the federal budget, I think it's about 22 billion of new money for community infrastructure. And so there seems to be some flexibility into what forms that could take, from the bridges that you described to recreational infrastructure or roads or otherwise. And so we're going to be looking to pair that up with New Brunswick's and our municipalities' priorities on where we need that to go to really develop our province and our communities the way that we need to.
I'm gonna switch gears here for a second. It's come across my desk. Perhaps there is an announcement coming for St. Andrews on a collaborative care clinic. I wonder if you could give me any information. Are you coming to town? What do you expect on that front?
We do have a number of community or collaborative care clinics to announce before the end of this year. I think you've heard me say a lot of times, we had committed to 10 this year. We are at 7 so far. I'm going to be making another collaborative care announcement this week to put us to 8, and there will be at least 2, but likely 3 more to come. And St. Stephen and St. Andrews, we're working to get those programs finalized, those announcement details finalized, and dates set. But I don't have a date or time for you for either St. Andrews or St. Stephen at the moment, Natalie, but certainly will be down in your neck of the woods before the end of this year.
Thank you. Jacob Moore, Acadia Broadcasting. No. Dan Arsenault, All New Brunswick. Not hearing. David Koch, MB Media Co-op.
Hello, Premier Holt. Did the Prime Minister indicate whether the $2 billion critical minerals sovereign fund announced in the budget will be used to underwrite or somehow support the Sisson mine or other projects in New Brunswick?
Well, that fund is something that we think could benefit a number of the mineral projects that we have on the docket, because we talk a lot about Sisson Mine, but there are actually a number of other projects that we are looking to advance, and knowing that the federal government has now set up a fund available for this specifically is really helpful to advancing those projects. And so Sisson specifically is not, I think, looking to pull from that particular fund with the kind of supports that we are looking for from the federal government to get that project designated and moving on to the next phase. But that will be helpful for a few of the other opportunities that we're developing into 2026.
Okay. Regarding the Sisson mine, what is the status of the feasibility study announced earlier this year?
The feasibility study.
There was a feasibility study that was receiving support, conditional support from the feds and support from the Department of Defense in the United States. An updated feasibility study by the company, I believe. Do you hear?
So both the Canadian government and the U.S. government made investments in the Sisson mine based on information from last year and early into this year. And so that funding has been received by the company to help with the further development of this mine, because it certainly is in the Canadian interest that we secure both resources like tungsten and molybdenum for our own defense interests and to fit with the global defense landscape right now. So those, if the feasibility studies was for the federal or US governments, then they have since made their provided funding to the project. That's on our end. We are working on engaging with the community, with the developer, working through the conditions that were established from the environmental impact assessment, the conditions that have been built into the impact benefits agreements and the accommodation agreements that are in place with this project, to make sure that all of those elements are being advanced.
Thank you, Premier. That concludes our list of questions. Did you have any closing remarks?
Well, I'll just say we're encouraged to have the Prime Minister come to New Brunswick and to demonstrate his interest in the projects that we feel can have the most impact for New Brunswickers, on our economy here, on our supply chains, on jobs for New Brunswickers, and the kind of economic activity that drives more customers and more revenue for our businesses. Alors, c'était vraiment un plaisir d'accueillir le Premier ministre et lui entendre exprimer une compréhension puis une priorité pour nos projets économiques de priorité, parce que notre objectif est de voir une activité économique ici à Nouveau-Brunswick qui retourne de bons salaires, de l'activité pour notre chaîne d'approvisionnement, pour voir cette activité qui retourne dans les communautés avec toutes les entreprises qui peuvent utiliser de nouvelles activités. It's encouraging to have him come and support our housing and modular housing companies, and to hear him talk about the different opportunities to get projects moving in our ports, critical infrastructure for our entire economy, in our energy space. That is something that we know is on the minds of a lot of New Brunswickers, is the affordability of our energy, the reliability of our energy, and the ability to access energy for economic growth to go forward. So I was pleased with the meeting. Looking forward to engaging with the Prime Minister again next week with the rest of my colleagues with Canada's premiers. And looking forward to seeing the benefits articulated in the federal budget realized for New Brunswickers as they look to get their health infrastructure supported and look to see affordability addressed by all levels, municipal, provincial, and federal, at the current time. So thank you. Thanks very much. Merci.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes today's media availability.